You wake up before dawn because the lanista doesn't believe in wasted daylight, and the first thing you feel is the weight of the iron around your ankle. That dull pressure that's been there so long you sometimes forget it exists until you try to move and the chain pulls tight. The ludus smells like sweat and olive oil and old blood that's been scrubbed from the training ground but never quite disappears, soaked into the sand in layers that go back years, and you breathe it in because there's no other air available, no other world that exists for you now. The other men are already moving in the darkness, those small, careful movements of people who've learned not to make noise, not to draw attention, and you can hear the shuffle of feet on stone and the quiet clink of chains and someone coughing in that wet way that means an infection that won't be treated unless he's valuable enough. You're called ferox now, which means fierce in Latin, which is almost funny because you mostly feel tired and hungry and aware of every old injury. But that's the name the crowd knows, so that's the name you answer to, the name written on the betting tablets. The sun is starting to come through the high, narrow windows, those slits that let in light but not hope, and you can hear sounds from the street outside, normal sounds of free people starting normal days, a woman laughing, a cart rolling past, a child asking questions, and those sounds exist in a completely different world from yours. A world that's 20 feet away but might as well be on a different continent. You eat the barley gruel they give you because food is food, and your body needs it even though it tastes like nothing. And you eat it in silence because talking during meals is discouraged through small punishments and withdrawn privileges and the constant awareness that your comfort, your continued existence, is always conditional. You stand in the courtyard while the doctor examines your ribs, his fingers pressing into the bruise that bloomed there 3 days ago. And he's not asking if it hurts, he's determining whether the injury will affect your performance next week, whether the lanista's investment is about to be compromised. His hands are cold and clinical, and they move over your body with the same detached interest you've seen in men evaluating horses at market, checking teeth and muscle tone and the quality of your breath, and you've learned not to flinch because flinching suggests weakness, and weakness affects your value. There's a group of men watching from the colonnade, wealthy Romans who come to the ludus the way some people visit stables, looking for promising fighters to sponsor or bet on. And you can feel their eyes on you, even though you're not looking at them, can feel the assessment happening, the mental notes being taken about your scars and your stance, and whether you look like the kind of fighter who dies entertainingly. The trainer walks around you in a slow circle, adjusting your posture with small painful prods from his stick, moving your arm up, your shoulder back, treating your body like a tool that needs maintenance, and you hold the position because your body stopped belonging to you the moment you entered this place. You catch your reflection in the polished bronze shield propped against the wall and barely recognize yourself, not because you look different, but because the person looking back has the eyes of livestock, has that particular blank awareness that animals develop when they understand they exist only for someone else's purpose. The lanista is making notes on a wax tablet, recording details about your condition the way a farmer records details about crops, noting which investments are flourishing and which are failing, and you know without being told that your value has decreased since last month, that the accumulation of small injuries has moved you down in the mental ledger from asset to depreciating resource. You remember when you tried to learn the real name of the man who slept in the cell next to yours, how he looked at you with something like fear and shook his head and turned away, and you understood then that friendship here is impossible, because every person you train with is someone you might have to kill next month or next week, if the lanista decides that's what will draw the biggest crowd. There was a kid once, couldn't have been more than 16, taken in a raid on some German village, didn't speak any Latin, and you tried to teach him a few words, tried to help him understand the basic rules of survival here. And for a few weeks, it almost felt like connection until they matched you against each other in a small afternoon bout that no one important was even watching. And you still remember the way he looked at you when he realized what was happening. That betrayed confusion that said he'd thought you were something like a friend. You killed him as quickly as you could, which was the only mercy available, and afterward no one mentioned it, because death is so routine here that commenting on it would be like commenting on the weather. They don't let you have anything that connects you to who you were before. No letters from family if you have family, no personal belongings except what the ludus provides, no name except the arena name they gave you, And you've noticed that you're starting to forget things, small details about your previous life that used to be solid but now feel vague and dreamlike. And sometimes you catch yourself responding automatically to ferox, without even a moment of resistance, without that small internal correction that says, "That's not really my name." The worst part is the silence, not the absence of sound, but the absence of real conversation. The way everyone here speaks in the abbreviated practical language of people who know that connection is dangerous, that caring about someone makes you vulnerable in ways that can be exploited. But if you think isolation was the worst part of being a gladiator, you haven't yet understood what happened when the gates opened and the crowd began to scream. The arena is larger than you expected, or maybe it's that you're smaller than you thought, standing in the center of this massive oval while 50,000 people make a sound like the ocean, and the sand under your feet is white and perfect, except for the dark patches where yesterday's blood has been incompletely cleaned and you can smell it. That copper smell mixed with your own fear sweat and the smell of wild animals kept in cells below the arena floor. Your opponent is someone you've never seen before, which means he's from a different ludus, which means you have no information about his style or his desperation level, and you're circling each other while the announcer shouts your names, your fake names, and the crowd is cheering, but not for you specifically. They're cheering for the spectacle, for the promise of blood and drama, and you understand with perfect clarity that you are not the protagonist of this story. You are a prop in someone else's entertainment. The fight itself is strange, not like training where the goal is improvement. This is performance, and you find yourself making choices based not on tactics, but on what will get the right reaction from the crowd, taking unnecessary risks because a safe defensive victory is boring and boring fighters don't get sponsored. You hear bone break and don't immediately know if it's yours or his. Feel hot blood on your skin and can't tell the source, and the sand is sticking to everything, getting in your mouth and your eyes, and the crowd is screaming louder now, on their feet, and you realize they're not reacting to skill or bravery. They're reacting to pain. Yours or his doesn't matter, they just want to see suffering delivered in an aesthetically pleasing way. He goes down and you're standing over him, and the crowd is making that sound they make. And you look at his face and see terror and exhaustion and something like relief that it's ending. And you give them what they want. Because that's the job, and when it's over and you're walking out, you understand that even though you won, even though you're alive, something essential has been lost. And he wasn't the only one. This is what matters. This is what transforms personal tragedy into evidence of system. Because what happened to him wasn't exception, wasn't anomaly. It was standard operating procedure for an empire that had learned how to turn death into profit. There was a veteran, a man who'd fought for 12 years and won enough bouts that people knew his name. And he'd been promised freedom after his next victory, had that promise in writing from his lanista. And he won that fight, won it cleanly, and then discovered that the contract had clauses, small print that essentially meant he'd signed himself into perpetual service, that his freedom was contingent on repaying costs that had been accumulating at interest rates that made repayment mathematically impossible. He kept fighting because what else could he do, and his body started breaking down the way bodies do when you've been hit too many times, his reflexes slowing just enough to be noticeable, and the lanista kept putting him in fights because his name still drew crowds even if his skills were diminishing. His final fight was against a novice, some kid who'd just finished basic training and was hungry and fast and had everything to prove. And it was scheduled as an opening bout, just filler entertainment while important people were still arriving, and the veteran went down in the first few minutes. Not dramatically, just down, just defeated. And the crowd barely reacted because they'd already seen this story before. His death was so routine that the announcer didn't even pause, just moved on to introducing the next bout while slaves dragged the body toward the gates. The prisoner of war was different, was someone who'd been captured during one of the endless provincial campaigns, and he didn't speak Latin, didn't understand the rules or why he was here, just knew that he'd been something normal in his previous life, and now he was standing in an arena holding a weapon he'd never been trained to use while people laughed at him. They matched him against an experienced fighter in what was called a comic relief bout. Entertainment designed to be funny rather than suspenseful, and the humor came from watching someone die incompetently, from watching terror played out in real time, and the crowd loved it. The children especially seemed to enjoy it, pointing and laughing, while this man stumbled and fell and tried desperately to defend himself with no idea how. The experienced fighter played it up, made it theatrical, knocking the prisoner down and then stepping back to let him get up again, extending the entertainment. And when the kill finally came, the body was left in the arena for the next few bouts, just lying there as a kind of decoration, and eventually some men dressed as demons came out and dragged it away with hooks while musicians played something upbeat. No one recorded his name because why would they? He wasn't a gladiator in any meaningful sense, he was just inventory that had been expended, a unit of entertainment that had been consumed. You're 32 when the lanista decides you're no longer profitable, that the cost of feeding you and housing you and providing medical care exceeds the revenue you generate. And this decision is made without consulting you, is made in the same casual way someone might decide to replace a broken tool. They match you against a fighter 10 years younger who's been winning consistently, who needs a recognizable name on his record to move up in the rankings, and you understand immediately what this is, can read it in the way the trainers avoid your eyes, in the quality of equipment you're given. You spend the night before thinking about running, about refusing, about all the options that don't actually exist, and you think about your real name, the one you were born with, and realize you can't quite remember it, can feel the shape of it, but can't bring it into focus. The walk to the arena is longer than usual, or maybe you're just walking slower. And the sand is hot under your feet, and you take your position and look at your opponent and see yourself 10 years ago. See that same desperate hunger to survive. The fight is short, not because you don't try, but because trying isn't enough anymore. Because your body has absorbed too much damage and can't respond the way your mind demands. And you go down and feel the sand against your face and hear the crowd making that disappointed sound they make when something ends too quickly. And you're aware of blood in your mouth and pain in your chest and the sun in your eyes, and then you're aware of less and then of nothing. They drag your body out with a metal hook that catches under your armpit, the same hook they use on everyone, and your corpse is thrown into a mass grave outside the city walls. A pit that contains hundreds of bodies covered with lime-to-speed decay, and there's no marker, no name, no record except perhaps a line in the lanista's ledger noting the termination of asset inventory. We visit the Colosseum now as tourists, take photographs in front of those massive walls, buy little plastic gladiator figures for our children, and we think we're connecting with history, with something ancient and important. But we're actually participating in the same sanitization that began the moment the games ended, the same process of turning horror into heritage, suffering into spectacle. The movies show us heroes, show us dignity in combat, show us men choosing to fight for honor or freedom, and in doing this, they complete the work that Rome started. They erase the reality of men who had no choice, who were livestock with heartbeats, who died not for any purpose beyond entertaining people who had nothing better to do on a Thursday afternoon. We've turned the Colosseum into a symbol of architectural achievement, rather than what it actually was, which was a factory for producing death efficiently and at scale, a machine designed to convert human bodies into entertainment and profit. And we've made this conversion because the truth is too uncomfortable, because acknowledging what actually happened there would require us to confront the ways we still consume suffering as entertainment, still treat certain bodies as expendable, still build systems that prioritize profit over humanity. History calls them gladiators, Rome called them inventory.